It was a regular Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in my office going over architectural plans for a new resort we're building in Carmel. The view was amazing, San Francisco Bay, Alcatraz Island in the distance, that kind of thing. My phone buzzed. It was my brother's number, so I picked up, expecting a quick chat, but surprise, it wasn't him. It was his fiancée, Victoria. Now, Victoria and we don't exactly get along. Her tone was way too sweet, like the kind of fake enthusiasm people use when they want something from you. She starts talking about our engagement party this Saturday, and I'm thinking, okay, this should be interesting. Little did I know, this conversation was about to change everything. Victoria starts talking in that syrupy, sweet voice, and I know right away this isn't going to be a normal conversation. She tells me they've decided to change the plans for the engagement party this Saturday. I'm thinking, okay, maybe they're switching the venue or something, but no. She goes on to say it's going to be a more intimate affair, and I'm like, all right, I get it. But then she drops the bombshell. She says, we're just going to keep it exclusive. It's going to be an upscale event at the Bayview Country Club. And, well, you're just not really the right fit for it. I froze for a second, and then the reality hit me. She was uninviting me because apparently I wasn't wealthy enough to be seen at such an upscale event. I mean, who even says that to someone? And she didn't stop there. Victoria starts listing all the things that made me unworthy of attending. You drive that old Honda, she says. You live in that tiny apartment, and you work at that little nonprofit nobody's ever heard of. And it's all said with this condescending attitude, like she's doing me some kind of favor by even explaining it. Her voice is just dripping with judgment, and it's like a slap in the face. It's so insulting, I almost couldn't even process it at first. I mean, she's standing there, in her designer clothes, acting like I'm some kind of embarrassment. And this is someone who's been engaged to my brother for 6 months. But in all that time, she's never even tried to get to know me. It's always been about what she assumed my life was like based on the surface. She's got this idea of me, but she doesn't have a clue about what I've built, what I've done. And here she is, telling me I'm too poor to attend a party at the country club she thinks is the epitome of high society. So I just had to ask her, wait, I don't think I understand. Victoria, you're uninviting me from your engagement party because you think I'm too poor for it? And of course, she laughs, that sharp, dismissive laugh, like I'm some sort of joke. She's like, oh, Sarah, sweetie, let's be real. This isn't about you. It's about the image. You know how these events go. We can't have someone who, well, doesn't fit the vibe. Right? It's a $50,000 event with all the high rollers from the city, Michael's law firm partners, my father's business associates, people from the country club board. I'm sorry, but it just wouldn't work. And I'm sitting there in my office, looking at the framed photo of me standing next to the governor at a groundbreaking ceremony. The one where we launched the new resort in Maui. That moment where I made the announcement for a $2.8 billion expansion. And I'm just thinking, is she really saying this? But I keep my cool because I've got more important things to deal with. I calmly tell her, I think you're misunderstanding my situation here. Victoria, you're uninviting me from an event at the country club I own. I'm not sure she even heard me, because she's already jumping in with her next round of explanations. She goes on and on about how the party's all about celebrating success and how people like me, who are just doing charity work, don't really belong there. We just can't have you there making everyone uncomfortable, she says. It's not personal, it's just business. I'm hearing all of this, but I'm not really listening anymore. It's all just noise, like a broken record. Her trying to justify treating me like I'm somehow beneath her. I'm honestly stunned at how rude and narrow-minded she's being. But at the same time, I'm also trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. This is too ridiculous. too personal to just let slide. I mean, she's acting like I'm invisible, like my achievements don't matter. And that's when it hits me. She has no idea who I really am. She has no clue about the empire I've built, and she doesn't even care. She's so focused on her own little bubble of status and appearances that she can't see anything beyond it. But then I remember something she didn't know. I remember the Bayview Country Club membership certificate hanging in my office, the one I got 3 years ago when I bought the place, the one she's just assuming I don't have any connection to. So I decide to give her a little reality check. You know, Victoria, I say, I think you're mistaken about something. I actually own the Bayview Country Club, the place where you're having this engagement party. There's a long pause on the other end of the line, like she's trying to process what I just said. And then she's quick to recover, like it doesn't really faze her, but I can tell I've caught her off guard. And that's when I smile, because it feels like she's just walked right into a trap of her own making. I calmly add, and if I wanted to, I could cancel your party at the country club, just like that. But I'm sure you wouldn't want that. There's another long pause, and then she stammers out some kind of half-hearted response. But I'm done. I hang up. I sit back in my chair, letting out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. And then I laugh. I laugh because she thought I was too poor to attend her engagement party at a place I own. The irony is just too perfect. I hung up the phone with Victoria, and I sat there for a moment, just letting the absurdity of the conversation sink in. Her voice was still echoing in my ears. "You're too poor to be at our engagement party," she had said. The irony was almost too much to handle. I was literally sitting in the office of a company I had built from the ground up. A company that now owned not just a luxury resort in Maui, but Bayview Country Club itself. And here was Victoria, dismissing me like I was some kind of charity case. I knew then that I couldn't just let it go. This wasn't just about me being excluded from her little party. It was about how they had misjudged me for years. They didn't know me. Not really. They saw what they wanted to see: the woman who drove a modest car, who didn't flaunt her wealth, who worked with nonprofits, and focused on things that mattered to her beyond money. They had no idea how successful I really was, and to be honest, I was tired of them thinking I was invisible. So I took a deep breath, pulled myself together, and decided to take matters into my own hands. I had a few calls to make. I wasn't going to just sit there and let them get away with this. I picked up the phone again, but this time, it wasn't Victoria's number on the screen. It was the general manager of Bayview Country Club, Robert Martinez. I needed to get him on the line immediately. I could feel the tension building in my chest, but I kept my voice steady as the phone rang. I didn't have time for games or apologies. I needed to handle this. When Robert finally picked up, his voice was warm and friendly, like it always was. "Miss Williams, what a pleasant surprise. How can I help you today?" I wasted no time. "Robert, I understand there's an engagement party booked for this Saturday evening. The Chin Williams party, right?" There was a brief pause, then he replied, "Yes, that's correct. Victoria Chin and Michael Williams. It's one of our larger events this month. They've booked our premium package, champagne reception, 5-course dinner, full bar service, live orchestra. It's a big deal. I want to cancel it," I said flatly. There was a moment of silence on the other end, and I could practically hear him processing what I'd said. "Cancel it," Robert repeated, his voice cautious. "Miss Williams, may I ask, why is there a problem with the service or the facilities?" I almost wanted to laugh. "No, Robert, there's no problem with the service. The problem is that the host, Victoria Chin, specifically uninvited the owner of the facility because she thinks I'm too poor to attend the party." The silence that followed was almost deafening. I could tell he was struggling to make sense of what I'd just said. I could hear the gears turning in his head, probably wondering if he'd misheard, but he was professional. I see, he said slowly. That's highly unusual. Should I call Miss Chin to discuss the cancellation? No, I replied firmly. Tell her exactly what I just told you. The event is being canceled because she uninvited the owner of the facility, and don't sugarcoat it. Robert hesitated for just a moment before answering. Understood. Miss Williams? I paused, then added, what about their deposit? I knew the deposit was significant, probably $15,000 or so, but that didn't even matter to me. I could have written it off as a loss without blinking. Keep it, I said. Consider it a lesson, Fee. There was another brief pause. I could almost hear Robert trying to decide if I was serious or if this was some kind of joke. Finally, he said, very good. Miss Williams, I'll make the call immediately. As I hung up, I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. This was it. This was the moment I was taking control. Victoria thought she could push me aside, treat me like I didn't belong in her world, and now she was going to get a taste of her own medicine. I wasn't going to let her get away with it, but I wasn't done yet. I couldn't just leave it at that. I had one more thing to do, one final step to make sure she understood who she was dealing with. I knew she'd try to spin this, try to blame someone else, but I wasn't about to let that happen. I made a mental note to prepare myself for whatever phone call came next. And it didn't take long. At 6:47 p.m., my phone rang again. It was Michael this time, not Victoria, but I could already hear her screaming in the background, her voice shrill, panicked. Sarah, what the hell is going on? Michael's voice was frantic. The country club just called and canceled our engagement party. They said the owner requested it. What's happening? This doesn't make any sense. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. It makes perfect sense, Michael, I said calmly. Victoria called me today to uninvite me from your engagement party because I'm too poor to attend. So I had the event canceled. There was silence on the other end of the line. Complete, total silence. I could tell Michael was shocked, maybe even embarrassed. He was struggling to process the reality of the situation. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. You don't own Bayview Country Club, he said, almost as if trying to convince himself. Shlee, I do, I replied, a little amused by his disbelief. Williams Hospitality Acquisitions purchased it 3 years ago as part of our luxury venue portfolio. Silence again. Michael was clearly floored. I could hear him trying to wrap his mind around it. And then, in a voice tinged with disbelief, he finally managed to ask, You own Bayview Country Club? I smiled to myself. I own Bayview Country Club, along with 17 other luxury venues across California. I also own 12 resort properties, 4 urban hotels, and a hospitality management company that generates about $800 million in annual revenue. The line went dead for a moment. It was almost too perfect. I felt a little sorry for Michael, but just a little. The phone rang again, and this time it was Michael. I could already hear Victoria in the background, her voice raised, frantic. Sarah, what the hell is going on? Michael's words were barely understandable over the chaos. The country club just called and canceled our engagement party. They said you requested it. Why would you do that? His frustration was palpable, and I could feel the tension building between us. I stayed calm. Maybe more calm than I should have been, but honestly, I was done with the nonsense. The whole situation had spiraled into ridiculousness, and it was time for him to face reality. It makes perfect sense, Michael, I said, keeping my voice steady, not giving in to the emotional whirlwind on the other end of the line. Victoria called me today to uninvite me from your engagement party because I'm too poor to attend. So I had the event canceled. There was a long pause. I could hear his breathing, but he didn't speak. I could tell he was trying to process what I had just said. It was almost comical how much he didn't get it. but I wasn't going to make excuses for my actions, and I wasn't going to apologize either. Victoria had crossed a line, and now it was time for everyone to see exactly who they were dealing with. "You don't own Bayview Country Club," Michael said, his voice incredulous. It was almost as if he was trying to convince himself more than asking me. "Shlee, I do," I said, not even bothering to sugarcoat it. "Williams Hospitality Acquisitions purchased it 3 years ago as part of our luxury venue portfolio." I heard him take a sharp breath, his confusion settling in. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Michael clearly wasn't ready to hear what was coming next. The silence was finally broken by a voice barely audible on the other end, but I could hear the disbelief in his words. "You own Bayview Country Club." His voice was low, still in shock. "I own Bayview Country Club," I said. "Along with 17 other luxury venues across California. I also own 12 resort properties, 4 urban hotels, and a hospitality management company that generates about $800 million in annual revenue." The words left my mouth almost effortlessly, but I knew they'd hit harder than I could have imagined. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael was still absorbing what I had just told him. He was trying to process the magnitude of the situation, but his mind was still stuck on the assumptions he'd held for years. The assumptions that I was just this small-town, nonprofit worker, driving a Honda Civic and living in a tiny apartment. He never bothered to ask questions. He never tried to get to know me, and now he was faced with the truth. A truth that shattered everything he thought he knew about me. And you could hear it in his voice when he spoke next. "But, Sarah, you drive a Honda Civic. You live in that small apartment in the Mission. You've always been so down to earth." It was like he was grasping for some kind of explanation that would help him reconcile what he was hearing. It was clear now he thought he knew me a song, but he had no idea. The layers of assumptions that he had piled on top of me were being stripped away, and it was obvious he wasn't sure how to handle it. I didn't let him off the hook, though I couldn't. This was the moment I had been waiting for. This was the chance for me to make him see. "I drive a Honda Civic because it's reliable, Michael," I said, my voice firm. "And it's environmentally responsible. I live in a 3,500 square foot loft in Soma that I bought for $4.2 million. I don't flaunt my wealth because that's not who I am. But just because I don't parade my success around doesn't mean I'm not successful." There was another long pause, and I could feel the weight of his silence. The silence that came with the realization that everything he had assumed about me was wrong. His assumptions, his judgments, they were all based on nothing but surface-level appearances. And now, the truth was laid bare. Michael finally broke the silence, but his words were hesitant, almost as if he was speaking to someone he didn't fully recognize. "But, Sarah, for 8 years, I've watched you, and I've never asked about your life. I never asked about your work. I just assumed. I assumed you were struggling. I never knew. I never bothered to ask." The weight of those words hit me harder than I thought they would. I had always known that my family, particularly Michael, had never truly seen me. They had never taken the time to understand who I was or what I was capable of. They had always dismissed me as the underachiever, the one who didn't fit into their perfect picture of success. But hearing him admit it, hearing him admit how wrong he had been, it was a punch to the gut. And it was also a moment of clarity. Michael was starting to realize just how much he had misunderstood me, just how much he had missed by not asking questions and making assumptions. He was coming to terms with the fact that I had built something monumental, something he had never even bothered to learn about. And that was exactly what I wanted. I wasn't asking for his approval, but I wanted him to understand. I wanted him to see me for who I really was, not who he thought I should be. I let the silence hang between us for a few seconds. Then I spoke again, more gently this time. Michael, you never bothered to ask about my work, my success, my life. You never showed any interest in what I was doing or what I had built. And I get it, I get that you were so caught up in your own world that you never stopped to think about the bigger picture. His voice was softer now, the frustration replaced with a sense of guilt. I know, Sarah, I'm sorry. I should have asked. I should have known. He was finally getting it, finally understanding the gap that had existed between us. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were starting to rebuild something. The bridge between us, one built on misunderstanding and assumptions, was starting to crack. There was still a long way to go, but this was the first step. It's not just about the money, Michael, I said, my voice steady. It's about the fact that for 8 years, your family has treated me like an underachiever while I've been building one of the most successful hospitality companies on the West Coast. You all assumed I was struggling, but you never bothered to ask. And now, look where we are. There was another pause, but this time it was different. Michael wasn't defending his position. He wasn't trying to justify his ignorance. He was listening. Really, listening. I'm sorry, he said again. I was wrong about everything. I was so blind. I never knew. I never took the time to understand. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. For the first time in a long while, Michael and I were having an honest conversation, and it felt good. I know, I said softly. And now you do. And that, in some strange way, was the beginning of something new, a new understanding, a new chance to rebuild the trust and respect that had been missing for so long. It wasn't long after our conversation that the phone rang again. I looked at the screen, and it was Michael. This time, there was no shouting, no panic in his voice. It was quieter, almost apologetic. I took a deep breath before answering, unsure of what I was going to hear. Sarah, I wanted to call and... He paused, his voice catching slightly. I wanted to apologize, really apologize. I didn't say anything at first. I just let him speak. I could hear the regret in his voice, the weight of everything he had just realized. And part of me, honestly, wasn't sure what to feel. I was glad he was finally seeing things for what they were, but a part of me was still hurt by how long it had taken. I'm sorry, Michael continued. I never should have allowed Victoria to treat you like that. I should have stuck up for you. I let her get away with saying things I knew weren't right, and I should have done something sooner. I could feel his frustration in the words, but I wasn't sure how much of that frustration was with himself or with her, maybe a little bit of both. I took a deep breath and responded, my voice softer than I had intended. It's not just about her, Michael. It's about all of you, your whole family. For years, you all treated me like I was, I don't know, like I wasn't enough, like I didn't belong in your world, but none of you ever stopped to ask. You just assumed, and now, here I am, and it's like you're seeing me for the first time. The words stung a little more than I thought they would. I hadn't really allowed myself to admit how much that had hurt, how much I had internalized their judgments, their assumptions, without ever being asked about my life, my work, my success. Michael's silence on the other end felt like a confirmation of everything I had been saying. I don't know what to say, though, he finally replied, his voice quieter now. I've always been so blind to everything you've been doing. I thought I knew you, Sarah, but I never did. I felt my chest tighten at his words. For years, I had worked hard to build something that mattered to me, to build something that didn't rely on anyone's approval, and certainly not their judgments. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. And hearing Michael finally admit that he had never bothered to understand, well, it wasn't as easy to forgive as I thought it would be. You didn't know, I said quietly, because you never bothered to ask. You assumed that because I didn't flaunt my success, because I didn't live my life the way you expected, that I must be struggling. But I wasn't. I wasn't at all. There was a long pause, and I could hear Michael breathing, trying to find the right words. I should have been there for you, he said finally. I should have defended you against Victoria. I should have never let her talk to you that way. And I could feel the sincerity in his words. For the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were actually getting somewhere. This wasn't just about the wealth or the family dynamics. It was about respect, about finally seeing each other for who we really were. You're right, I said. And this time, I wasn't just talking to him, I was talking to myself, too. You should have, but it's not just about what happened with Victoria. It's about the fact that, for years, you all never really saw me. You never took the time to ask. You just assumed I was living in the shadows of your world. I could hear him shifting on the other end of the line, like he was trying to understand what I was saying. He didn't get it all at once, but it was a start. I'm sorry, he said again, more softly this time. I'm so sorry, Sarah. And that apology, the way it came from him, felt different than anything I had heard before. It wasn't just an apology for the situation at hand. It was for all the years of silence, all the years of misunderstanding. It's okay, I said, though it didn't feel entirely okay. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but you did, and you can't take that back. But maybe this is a turning point for us. Maybe now we can finally see each other for who we really are. There was a moment of silence, and I could almost hear Michael processing everything I had just said. It was like he was finally hearing me, not the version of me he had imagined, but the real me, the one who had worked hard, fought battles, and built something meaningful from the ground up. I'd like that, he said, his voice quieter now, more reflective. I really would. I smiled softly to myself. I didn't know where things would go from here, but at least we were finally talking. At least, for once, there was a bridge between us, a bridge built on truth, not assumptions. And that felt like a start, a real start, for the first time in years. A few weeks had passed since that conversation with Michael, and things were different now. It wasn't just about the canceled party or the wealth or the superficial judgments anymore. What mattered was that for the first time in years, my family had actually started to see me. They had learned something important, something that I had always known, but had never been able to make them understand. Success isn't always visible from the outside. It doesn't always fit into the neat little boxes people expect. And most importantly, people aren't defined by appearances alone. Michael and I had been talking more, really talking, not just about the business, but about what I'd been doing with my success, about the work that meant the most to me, the kind of work that went beyond luxury resorts and multi-million-dollar deals. We talked about the Williams Foundation, the 47 libraries we had built in underserved schools, the literacy programs I had started to help children who didn't have access to the resources they needed. And with every conversation, I could feel the distance between us closing. Michael was listening, really listening, And he wasn't just hearing me, now he was understanding. The more we spoke, the more I saw a shift in him, a shift in how he saw me and my work. He was finally grasping that I wasn't the woman he had assumed I was. I wasn't just the quiet sister who didn't fit into the family's picture of success. I had my own version of success, and it had nothing to do with flashy cars or extravagant parties. It had everything to do with what I built, what I gave back, and the integrity with which I lived my life. And honestly, it felt good. It felt good to know that I wasn't invisible anymore. Michael, too, was learning that success comes in many forms, that wealth isn't the only measure of a person's worth, and that respect should never be conditional. As we continued to talk, there was this unspoken understanding between us, a new bond forming, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was truly seen, not just by Michael, but by the people around me. What Victoria had done, the way she had dismissed me, had taught me something too. It had reminded me of the importance of staying true to who you are, regardless of how others perceive you. And in the end, I think that was the real victory, not the canceled party, not the money, but the realization that real respect and understanding can only come when you see people for who they truly are. And that's it for today's story. Sometimes it takes a moment of unexpected truth to help us see things differently, and that can lead to some pretty amazing personal growth. If you've enjoyed this story of learning, self-respect, and unexpected revelations, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more. You never know what surprising lessons life might throw your way, and I'll be here to share those stories with you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.